Hey everyone, just thought I'd make a video since I just did a couple more for our lectures. I'm about to mix a song "Oh Christmas Tree" for the Holiday Fest stream that's going out next Friday, and I'll probably split this up into however many videos I need to split it up into, but just thought I'd do like start and finish, me doing a mix. A lot of the stuff is already set up. A lot of plugins I've already assigned and tweaked with a bit because we did a sound check and then I had several hours to mess around and kind of dial in the sound. So a lot of that's already done. This is mostly just going to be how, how I set things up and why, and just kind of my process of getting levels, using automation, probably some editing going on, and as far as, like I said, EQ and compression, I'm probably going to not do much, if anything, because I've already done quite a bit. But this folder, I'm going to do a save as, like I always do. Actually, let me close this. Nope, save session. There we go. And I'll call this Music 2071, so that if you want to come in and see where I started from and where I end up, by all means. But like I said, a lot of the EQ and compression, I already spent some time on that because I had the time between soundcheck and our live stream. So, and I don't know if you remember from class, I was talking about, I set this one up a little differently than I normally would because of the live stream and because of this this control surface I have, and how sometimes it just cuts out, because it's all running through USB and it just needs to be restarted sometimes. So to minimize the number of faders I would need to grab, I made a lot more aux tracks than I would normally have for a typical mix. So I had 2 kick mics, kick in, kick out, snare top, snare bottom, a couple of tom mics, the rack tom and floor tom, overheads, bass DI, bass mic, piano. I always separate them as low and high rather than just left and right, so I know which one's on the lower side of the keyboard versus the higher notes. And so, again, just to minimize the amount of plugins, the amount of processing I would have to do, both the kicks I sent to a mono kick aux, both the snares, a mono snare aux, or aux track that I named kick, snare, toms. The toms and the overheads I made stereo because they're panned, right? And if you notice, the rack tom and the floor tom are panned differently from each other. And I did this as audience perspective, really. So like, if you're looking at the drummer, the rack tom would be a little bit on the right side and the floor tom would be a little bit more so to the left. So I pan those accordingly, like as if you're looking at the drum kit, where they would be placed. It's not a necessity, it's just something I like to do depending on what perspective I'm mixing it from. And so then my overheads are the same way. So this left overhead would be, if I'm facing the drum kit, there would be the left mic and the right mic. And then the overheads are just panned hard left and hard right. Piano, same thing. Now, none of these are hard, fast rules. Like we've talked about many times before, there's no right or wrong. This is just how I do it. This is my process. And so got the overheads. I've got all of these tracks, all the drums, kick, snare, toms, overheads, going to another stereo aux for my drums, where I'm doing a little bit more EQ, mostly just cutting some low mids, some mids out. A little bit of boost in the highs, a little bit of boost in the lows, and then some more overall compression. Bass is all going here. Because we're using a mic on the bass amp, there's a lot. I don't really need much of the high frequencies coming coming from that, so I rolled a bunch of them off. There was a little bit of annoying kind of hum coming from around 500 hertz, so I cut that a little bit. And then on bass, I think I've mentioned this. I compress the bass quite a bit in a lot of cases. So my threshold's fairly low. Ratio's kind of standard, but then the attack and the release, I don't always mess with the attack and release. Just kind of depends. You can see. So the more to the left on these settings, this is a faster attack and a slightly longer of a release time. Meaning the on this one, this is the toms. So the compressor is going to engage really quick. That's what this quick attack time means. And then the release time is also fairly short. I think it defaults probably to about halfway. Whereas here on the snare, I have the attack of a pretty fast attack, so it's going to engage this compressor really quickly, but it's going to release more slowly. So as the compressor is going, let's see if the drums come in here. Well, this song is mostly brushwork. There's a couple snare hits, but it's a lot of brushwork. But there was a snare hit right there. It's really light because again it's all brushes, but you can see it just hits that compressor real quick. These settings I dialed in while they were warming up and running through a couple pieces, so they were playing a lot heavier when I did a lot of these settings. So for this particular track, the compressor on this snare drum is probably not going to do much of anything, but there's also no reason for me to take it off because it's hardly going to get engaged at all even. So I'm not going to bother changing anything. I think the overall sound was pretty good, so I'm not going to fool around a lot with that. So I did my save as, so if anything happens in the session that I don't like, I can always go back. I like to see as many of my audio tracks as I can. And so all these aux tracks, I don't really need to see what's going on there because there's no audio. There's no audio files. All that's happening is my processing here. So I just put these on the micro setting so they don't take up a lot of space. And everything else that has audio on it, I want to see that fairly well. This is my print track. This is the rough mix I did already. So I keep these small enough to where I can see everything, so I can see what's going on. And in fact, the horn, I can bring this up here. There we go. So now I've got all my audio followed by all my aux tracks, including a reverb, delay, my print bus, where I have a little bit more. Well, I didn't do any EQ to that. But then I've got some compression with this limiter, and then my frequency spectrometer. I think it's a spectrometer. Anyway, so that's it for the processing. First thing I'm going to do is, okay, my automation set to read. I'm going to turn it off for now because I don't know if I wrote any on here previously, so I'm just going to turn it all off and take a little listen. Okay, it starts out with just piano. So the band comes in there about, I don't know, 20 seconds in maybe. So first off, I mean, it's not necessary really, but I can just cut all this audio up until everything comes in. I mean, there's nothing going on there. All that's happening is the piano is bleeding into those mics, and this was done in the black box, which is not it's not an acoustically good sounding room. So there's I'm probably not improving much by cutting that, but I'm certainly not improving anything by leaving it in. So I might, I probably would typically cut that anyway. Nothing's planned, and then just put a little fade on these other tracks here. And I'm gonna mute the piano and just make sure I didn't chop off more than what I wanted. So I kind of chopped off that cymbal a little bit. So if I highlight all of these, I could do one of two things. But what I'm gonna do is if I highlight all of these, which do with the grabber tool, right, and then shift and arrow down, which is the semicolon key, we'll just select everything down there. And I'm just gonna grab that and move it back. So, actually, I might not have really chopped it off. I think Preston was playing, and I think he just kind of did a natural little fade in of his own with that cymbal. So that's fine. Let's see. Here's the piano. So just because, I'll chop that, put a little bit of a fade here. Again, I mean, this is just really kind of being nitpicky, but it's just something I've gotten the habit of doing. It's not necessary all the time, especially, I mean, the room's dead. Sometimes you can hear a little bit of the room sound, like either a hissing sort of white noise kind of thing. If you've got the volume up loud enough, you might hear just some room noise that I don't want to hear till the piano, or once the piano comes in, that would be unnoticeable anyway. So now that with that fade in, definitely not going to hear it. And I'm not sure if you could hear it, but I've already got some reverb. Going. You can see it right here. Not a ton, but I think it's kind of tasteful. I might actually bring it up a notch. Oh, there's a reason why I had my horn, the saxophone, which on here I just have it labeled horn. Could relabel it sax. There's a reason why I had it down here, and that reason is because now my buses. So I'm basically going to be adjusting my levels on these aux tracks, right? Except for the horn, because there's no reason to bus that. It's just its own signal. It's just a single channel. So now between all these, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tracks, and so and so now those fit perfectly on my 8 faders here. So there was a reason why I did that to begin with. I just forgot about it. So, and again, that's because during the live stream, I just wanted to control these 8 faders, and so now I have everything going on in this song. I have it right here in front of me. And all this zooming in, zooming out that I do, a lot of it is just habit. I've just always got my hands on the keyboard and trackball, and I just like to see what I'm doing. Sometimes it's literally just, I don't know, just something to do. It's just so second nature and so habitual. If you're wondering why I'm doing it, sometimes it's for no reason. Sometimes it's really because I'm looking at something in particular. But plenty of times there's no rhyme or reason why I'm doing it. It's just something I do without even thinking about it most of the time. So what I typically would start doing is just kind of get a balance on the drums. And I think already the levels are pretty good, but you know, never hurts to just rebalance things. It's not a whole lot of times where he hits the kick. There's one right there. But then I'll just kind of start bringing things up. There's my brushes. I don't think he hits the toms at all in this track. So I'll just set it somewhere and leave it. I don't think, like I said, I don't think he hits any toms, but if he does, I'll hear it, and if I need to bring it up, I can make adjustments from there. There's my overheads. Now you can hear a lot of saxophone in the overheads. It's unavoidable. Probably could have got rid of a little bit of that with different mic placement, but not going to ruin anything. Alright, so that's not bad. Let's bring the bass in. And literally at this point, all I'm doing is listening. I'm not really paying attention to where the fader's at. Just trying to listen to where it sounds good. So now we're in the bass solo. So I'm actually going to back it up. I'm going to start it over. Because the bass solo I might want louder than where the bass is going to sit through the rest of the track. Right? So right now I'm just trying to get an overall balance where everyone's just grooving normally. Let's bring the piano in. Oh, even more sax now through the piano mics. That's okay. And there's our sax. And then every once in a while, I like to just check my frequency spectrum here. It's got a pretty even distribution going on, so that's pretty good. Not that that's always the target, but you know, nothing's standing out. Nothing's. I'm not boosting any frequencies too much, so that's a good thing. I don't know if you noticed that snare. Again, I'm just recording my voice on the phone here. Sorry, everybody. This snare hit right here was a little louder. There looks like there's a couple times where he gives it a good whack. This first one, though, because it's the first time he does it, and the song really hasn't kind of kicked in a gear yet, it just stood out to me right now. So what I'm going to do, actually, before right now I turned my automation off, if you remember. So what I'm going to do, pardon me, is I'm going to automate the volume for this whole song. Excuse me, for the whole song here. So I'm going to get, I'm just going to put it on everything. All my actual audio tracks, all my aux tracks, the horn, the saxophone track. Not going to bother with the reverb, the delay, the print bus, or my 2-track. Those I don't really want to automate. But I'm going to just shift option and put everything into auto right. And if I change into my volume view, when I hit play, we're going to see those black bars, those black lines represent where my faders are at right now. And when I press play, they're going to turn red, showing that I'm writing that volume automation. because I've got my levels set pretty much where I think everything's sitting pretty well. I'll make some adjustments as solos go around. I'll make some adjustments as things just, they play a little louder in a certain section, or maybe like a little quieter in a certain section. I'll make adjustments after that. So I'm actually not going to play the whole thing. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to, I'll just hit this all group. I'm going to take all of these, and I'm going to go up to my nudge, this nudge up here. So I just highlighted that breakpoint. When I hit stop, it made a edit point where I stopped writing automation. So I'm going to highlight that little bit. I'm going to go to nudge, and I'm going to change this to 5 minutes. And then when I zoom out, watch what happens. I'm going to hit the plus key, and the plus key just nudged that edit point ahead 5 minutes. So now instead of listening down to the whole song to write that automation, I listened for a little bit, recorded the automation, and then I just moved it all down so that the whole song, that level of that setting on the volume, that automation now has been written for the whole track. And then you see it went back to touch. So now anything I want to do, and let me take my group off of all, because I don't want, if I have all the tracks grouped, if I touch one of these faders, they're gonna all move. I don't want that. But you can see I do have a bunch of groups here that I already set up. I have one for my drums. There's all my drum tracks. I have one for the bass, piano. There's only one horn. I definitely didn't need to make a horn group. I'm not using the room mics, but I made one for the room. In fact, I could delete that, I guess. Oops. I can delete the room group. This tells me this is not undoable. That's okay. I don't need the horns group either. So I'm going to delete that. I have one for all my buses. Actually, not all of them. I can modify that. If you double click on the left side over here where that little dot is, it'll bring up this modify groups window. I go to tracks. So I want to bring in my kick, and you can just double click these and it'll add them to the group. Snare, toms, overheads, and those should be all my aux tracks. I call them buses here. I use that interchangeably. Might not be best Pro Tools grammar. I don't know if I use them interchangeably a lot. So sometimes I might say my snare bus or my snare aux track, but I mean the same thing. So now I've got my first passive automation written, and now what I'm going to do is just kind of touch up a few things. So like first, I said that snare hit was a little loud, right? As we're listening, it just stood out a little to me. So one thing I could do, I can either actually grab the fader and bring that down, which, let me hit play and just demonstrate that. And so I was doing that on my snare aux track. You can see, let me undo that, and I'll do it again so you can see it. Now, it didn't really do a whole lot, to be honest. I don't hear a whole lot of a difference. And if you think for a second, you might realize why. Okay, there's a couple seconds. Well, it's because it's also coming through a lot in the overhead mics. So I could either do the same thing on the overheads, right? I'm just going to make that bigger so we can all see it. I could do the same thing with the overheads. But now I kind of hear that dipping too much. So I don't really want to do that because I'm actually hearing the change when we go back. So what I might do is just on the actual audio tracks themselves, just grab just this little bit, just the attack, and bring that down a couple dB. And let me make that a little bigger so you can see. So all I did, if you just highlight, once you're in this volume view, if you just highlight a section and you go up to the top half of the waveform, it becomes your trim tool, and you can trim that volume automation. And you can trim it all the way to 0, you can trim it all the way up to plus 12. If you hold down Command, it'll go a little slower. So you can like fine tune it a little more. So like, if, oh, that's way too much, or oh, I'm trying to get it to exactly 2 dB down. Well, that's a little tough sometimes, but if you hold Command, it'll go in 1/10 of a dB increments, and it's a lot easier to dial it in a little more exactly. So I'm holding down Command, I'm just going to bring those down 2 dB, just right on the attack of it. And I'm going to do the same thing with the overheads. And in fact, I'm going to group these. Apple G or Command G will group tracks. I'm just going to call this overheads. That way, instead of doing it twice, I only have to do it once. And so I brought down the snare, both the top and bottom, and the overheads left and right, 2 dB down. I'm going to hear what that sounds like. Still not a ton of a difference. I'm going to group these snares too, so I don't have to do this twice. Now I'm going to go back to my nudge, and I'm going to bump this down to 100 milliseconds. Whoops, that might be too much. Let's split the difference. Yeah. And I'm going to bring them down maybe another 2 dB a piece. And so, as you can see already, mixing can be a pretty slow process, and a lot of times it's listening to the same thing over and over until that sounds good. So for me, that works a lot better. So I'm going to go ahead and move on, because that is after bringing them down another 2 dB. Now it's at a level that doesn't stand out to me, but it also doesn't stand out that I changed the level of the drums at all. So that's kind of, if you're trying to, obviously, if you're trying to make it sound natural, you want to make a change that you don't actually notice as it's playing down, if that makes sense. So I notice the difference now versus from the beginning, but I don't hear that I did anything when I'm just listening back, if that makes sense. It sounds natural, in other words. There we go. Yeah, much better. And while we're at the top of the song here, so the piano comes in by itself. I'm going to boost the piano a little bit at the beginning. And for that, like I could highlight all of the piano, or on my piano bus. Make it bigger. Now this automation that's drawn in, that's where I hit automation right. So here was 0. Here's where not 0. Here's where it was. Here's where I set it when I wrote the automation. So I didn't, this is from that very first writing automation pass. So I could just bring up this whole bus here, right? I could do that. But what I like to do, especially with music, if it's dialogue or, some kind of effect, I might just draw it in, but I'm going to go ahead and use the faders for a couple reasons. One, I've got them, and two, it's kind of like a performance on my part. The piano's fluctuating. I think Addie was playing on this, so the weight of her playing is not a perfectly even every time, and not that it needs to be, but I might not want to raise or lower the whole thing in any given amount, is what I'm saying. So I'm just gonna, oops, that's the piano bus, which actually that's fine. I could do it on there. So you see, I brought it up overall, but as the song gets ready to start, as the band gets ready to kick in, I started bringing it down a little slowly so that it gets back to the level I set it at where the whole band is playing, without some kind of abrupt, loud, back down however many decibels, right? Let's just take a listen. Yeah, it's kind of nice. In fact, these first few notes, I might just bring them up a little more. And so that's what touch mode does. It only writes new automation when you're actually touching it. Then it'll snap back to whatever was written before. Yeah. Okay, I like that. I'm going to go back into waveform view. Let's see here. Kind of like where everything's sitting at the moment. We haven't really got into the solos yet, but since we're still at the top of the track, let's go ahead and take a listen to the saxophone, see if everything there is sitting how we like it. So again, you probably can't really hear it that great through my phone that I'm recording this on, but the saxophone, the levels are still, I have got some compression on it, but there's still some notes that just stand out more than others. And now I could automate the volume, or I could maybe just try compressing it a little more. So I'm going to bring my threshold down a little, maybe bring the compression ratio down too. Let's just see if that evens things out a little bit. Yeah, so that evened out a lot of those notes that were standing out to me earlier. So like you can even see where, there's little peaks, peaks, and those were standing out, and just compressing it a little more evened a lot of that out. Now I didn't wreck the dynamics of the performance, but I just evened them out a little bit. But, and again, like I said, you probably can't really hear as clearly as I'm hearing in the room here, but it did bring the overall level down. So that's why on, most compressor plugins, you have this gain adjustment. So I can bring up the overall level. Once you compress it, you can then bring the volume back up a little. So it's no different than adjusting the volume on the track, right, on my fader, or in the automation. But I made the adjustment on the compressor, so I can just, or the volume was lowered overall by compressing it more, and that's why they give you this gain parameter. And so I'm just going to do it on the compressor. Okay, then we are getting in the piano solo, and excuse me, and you can see all this dead air here, right? Pardon me. So I'm just going to cut all that out, and just make sure I didn't chop anything off. Nope, that's where the saxophone ends. Just because, I'll put a little fade out, a little fade in. Take a listen, make sure it sounds okay. Listen on the other side. And what I'm listening for there is just to make sure that it doesn't sound unnatural, that I cut out something that was there. Now, it was really just minimal bleed, from the drums, bass, and piano. But it was really minimal. I just wanted to make sure that it didn't sound like something, that I took something away. And it doesn't sound like it to me, so we're all good. What else? So now we're coming into the piano solo. So I'm going to go ahead and, while the solo's happening, just bring that level back up a little. Actually, that seemed like a little too much to me, to be honest. I'm going to bring up just this edge of my mix window so I can see what my print bus is doing. Just keep an eye on my meters. Got a little louder than my liking. Then it sounds like we get in the bass solo. So we'll do the same with the bass. So here's an instance where this control surface just isn't as responsive as I need it to be. And partly that's because it's connected USB and not Ethernet, and partly it's just because it's a little on the cheap side. So what I was trying to do, I don't know if you heard it, but there's a couple notes in the bass that really stand out. And it's not because he's playing so much louder, it's really the frequencies there. But I don't want to go in, I don't want to take the time to automate a plug-in to cut out some of those frequencies, so I'm just trying to do it a little more quickly with volume. This fader, the faders aren't letting me dip that down quick enough and bring it back up quick enough to my liking. So what I'm going to do now is just draw that in, because it's just not changing quick enough for me. So, oops. So again, in the volume view, if you hold Command or Apple, hello. Oh, my special tool wasn't engaged. So I always have this special tool engaged. I know I've talked about that before. When that is, if you hold Control or Apple, it'll give you this little finger with a plus sign, and you can make edit points by clicking wherever. So this bass note, oops, don't move it. This bass note is right here. That's the one that's really standing out. So I just want to bring that down. In fact, I could have brought this, or I can bring this a little forward in the song. So my nudge is set right now at 50 milliseconds. So I'm just going to go back. There we go. That's probably good. Way better. So again, I'm not sure if you can hear that, but feel free to come in and open this session up. I saved it as Music 2071. So if you do come in and open this up to take a look at any of this, just do a save as and save it as Music 2071, your name, so that I can still always come back to this mix. But so I was trying to do basically exactly this, just with the faders. But the faders just aren't as responsive enough as I need them to be to make that move. If this was a more high-end control surface, I could have done it. It might have taken me a few tries, but I could have gotten it. This way, got exactly what I wanted, exactly where I wanted it, just by making the edit points and trimming down the automation, right? So I don't want to go that far, but now it sounds way more evened out. That one's fine. And that part right after, though, he's playing a lot higher, so it's not ringing out quite as much, and I'm going to bring that up a little bit. Oh, nope, because my faders died. So here's an example of a lost communication with the computer, probably because I was trying so much, trying to do so many moves, so many quick moves, that it just loses communication. So if you just power it off, give it a second or two, power it back on, and it'll snap back into place. There we go. Now those first couple notes of the saxophone, when we come back in, just because the whole band got a lot quieter, the saxophone isn't really loud there. It's just relative to what we're coming out of that bass solo, and the piano and drums are laying back quite a bit. It's not that the saxophone's loud so much as it seems a little abrupt. So I'm going to bring that down a little as we come into it. Literally, that's it. just that entrance, just to give us a sense that we're easing back into the whole band. Actually, here it does seem a little too loud to me. So for a lot of that, it just sounded a little loud to me. And so I just want to bring that whole section down, I don't know, maybe 1.5 dB for now. Let's just hear what that sounds like. Maybe that second little note there. So I just brought those two notes down a little bit, and then brought it back up to get that kind of air out of the tail end of the saxophone there. Yeah. Now the cymbals Preston got a little carried away there with the cymbals. Just kidding. But he hasn't really been doing a whole lot on them up to this point. So I'm going to go on my volume. Actually, I have a overheads bus, don't I? I do. So I'm going to go to my overheads bus. I'm not going to do the whole drum kit, at least for starters. I'm just going to bring down the overheads a bit, see if that makes me happier. Yeah, I think that's better. There's one hit right there. Let's see, is the saxophone still too loud there, guys? Yeah, I'm just going to bring, so I already brought this section down a little. I'm just going to bring the rest of it down to match it. And really just up to that point where I made this move here. And that little thing right there is probably not going to be noticeable. Let's just check it out. Yeah, it kind of is. So if you hold Option, let me zoom in a little more. If you hold Option and click on those breakpoints, it'll just delete them. So let's take a listen again. And person could have let those cymbals ring out a little more, but that's okay. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'll probably listen down one more time. Might make a few more little tweaks on volume here and there, but that's kind of my process overall. And then I'm just gonna bring all these back down. I'm a little anal sometimes about the view of my Pro Tools windows. Just wacky personal preferences that I have. But yeah, I think that's pretty darn good. I'm also gonna, actually, I'll just do it while we're here. I'm gonna compress the stereo bus, the print bus, a little more, because I just want to bring the overall level up. And let's see, I don't have any EQ overall. I could bypass this, or I could just remove that plugin altogether, but because it's not doing anything. But I'm not going to bother really right now. What I'm going to do is, well, I've already got this limiter on here. That's probably good enough. So when I bring down, as I bring down the threshold, actually I'm going to bump this ceiling up to about minus 0.5. Yeah, close enough. So that's my out ceiling. It's not going to let, this limiter is just not going to let this signal get above minus 0.5 dB. So I know I'm not at all going to get any digital clips. That's what this ceiling parameter does. The threshold is going to adjust how much of the signal is being compressed. And the knee and the release on this particular plugin, I don't typically fool with a whole lot. I haven't really had any problems with whatever the default settings are. But as I bring down the threshold, it's going to compress this more, raising the level, because it's going to, depending on what threshold I set it at, it's going to compress it more or less. So as I bring the threshold down, it's going to compress it more, but it's making that gain up while it's doing it, just to not let it exceed minus 5.1 dB. So you'll see on the meter here, on both of these actually, you'll see exactly what happens. So here's without, and here's with it in. So now that just totally cranked the volume up. So I'm going to turn it down in the control room. And as I listen down, I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, but as I listen down, I'm going to see if increasing the compression on here just kind of threw anything out of balance at all. And if it did, I'll make those minor adjustments as I go. But other than that, I'm pretty much done. And I'm going to print it and send it to Connor. And because he's putting all the Holiday Fest stuff in order, because he's just going to make it one continuous video to upload. So that's coming out next Friday. If you want to check it out, I think there's going to be a lot of good stuff on there, and this will be on there. So, and by all means, like I said again, if you want to come in the studio and just look through some of these particular things that I did, you can always come in, open this session up, the Music 2071 Oh Christmas Tree. I'll show you exactly where it lives on our active drive, right? Fall 2020. It's in this 2011-17 jazz combo. And here's our Pro Tools Session Music 2071. So it's in 2011-17 jazz combo, Oh Christmas Tree, Music 2071. Just do a save as, and once you do a save as, you can do anything you want to the session. If you want to turn off, you can turn off all the automation. In fact, I'm going to do a save as just in case I screw something up. I call this 2071.1. So you can turn off all the automation and totally rebalance things however you want, right? Hit play. You can get your own mix going. Right? If you want to write your own automation, all you would do then is turn this into auto write. Now the cool thing about the automation is that since it's all written, it still exists there, right? So most of my automation I wrote on these tracks, right? Now you can see the black is the automation that I wrote, and these blue lines are where I just moved the fader to. So on the toms track, right, if I raise this, you see that blue line go up. That's where the fader is now. The black line is where my automation is. So if I turn the automation here back to read, that blue line goes away, and when I hit play, you'll see the fader jump back to where the black line on the screen, where the automation is written. Right, so none of that is going to get ruined. I can turn them all into read mode, and everything goes back to exactly how I had it. But if you want to get your own mix, you can just turn all the automation off. You can look at what I did on these plugins. You can always start from scratch. You can set this to no insert, take the plugin off completely, or you can click bypass, turn the plugin off. Right. So if you want to take a listen to to the bass, for instance, let's solo the bass. Go to where the bass is playing. So because these are the auxiliary tracks, these are the aux tracks, I can't just solo this because there's no audio on here. There's no audio on this track. The audio exists on the audio tracks. So you got to solo them because they're the ones going to this bass bus. And that's why all the auxes you put in solo safe mode, because if it wasn't, which is just Apple clicking, you Apple click on the solo button to put it in solo safe. If this is not solo saved and I solo these tracks, I don't hear anything. Because Pro Tools is saying, hey, you only want to hear these two tracks. Well, these two tracks are being bussed to this track, but this track isn't soloed, so I don't hear that. If you solo safe it, put it in solo safe mode, now, no matter what is soloed, these are still going to be included in that. So if you want to hear the bass with the processing I did, and you want to hear it without, you can just bypass all these plugins. You can either open them and click bypass, or on the plugin itself right here, you can hold Apple and just click it, and it'll bypass them. So you can hear how it was raw, or how it was originally tracked, and hear what the plugins do to it. And then you can kind of see, if you want to look, okay, I see. When I bypass that, I hear the cymbals coming through a little more. When I re-engage that plugin, because all the high end's chopped off, I don't hear those cymbals anymore. So if you want to just come in and check it out and see what I did, have a listen and mess with it yourselves, please, by all means. I do have, like I said, I've got some reverb, not a ton, just a tiny bit on the drums. Got a decent amount on the piano and on the saxophone, and just one little, trick. I don't know if that's even the right word, but I have this delay set up. I'm sending a little bit of the saxophone to a delay, and this delay is about 1/4 of a second. So if we solo the saxophone, if we mute it, well, you'll hear it. If you come in here and take a listen, you'll hear it. And you can just, if you want more delay, we can increase the delay. And so what I was getting at, though, is the delay. I'm sending a little bit of the saxophone to this delay, but then I'm also sending some of the delay to the reverb. And it's just to kind of thicken it up a little. It's probably not even really noticeable. It's just something that for cases like this, I do sometimes. It's not something I always do. But in case you see that and are wondering what the heck that is there for. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to end it there. I'll chop this up into several videos and put these up on the course YouTube that I made. And yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that was helpful if you're wondering just kind of where to start with mixing. Like I said, I know all the EQ and compression I did beforehand, but that's a really boring process to sit and watch. I don't even know how interesting this video is going to be as it is, but you know, you can always look at what I did, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to explain why I did a particular thing. But just by listening and like bypassing the EQ, you might be able to hear exactly what change was made. And it might be clear just by listening to it, the EQ, the plug-in in versus the plug-in out, what changed and why. So anyway, there you go.